In Hollywood, power doesn't just make careers, sometimes it destroys them. Behind the glamour, behind the red carpets, there exists a secret history of punishment, exile, and silent studio decisions that erased actors overnight. Some stars broke rules, some questioned the system, others got tangled in scandals, politics, or feuds with the wrong executives. But what really gets a celebrity banned from a major studio? And how many careers were quietly shut down without the public ever knowing the truth? Stay until the end, because the final cases reveal the shocking reasons why some stars were erased from the industry's biggest stages. And before we begin, remember to like, subscribe, and follow Tick for more untold Hollywood stories. 25. Megan Fox. Megan Fox rose to fame at lightning speed, becoming one of Hollywood's most recognizable faces thanks to her breakout role in a blockbuster franchise. Her mix of attitude, beauty, and confidence made her the industry's new obsession. But just as quickly as she rose, her career hit a wall, one largely built by her own words. In a now infamous interview, Megan compared director Michael Bay to authoritarian figures, a remark that shocked studio executives. Paramount, which relied on Bay for one of its most profitable franchises, saw her comment as a public betrayal. The fallout was swift. She was removed from the next film, and insiders claimed she became quietly unwelcome within the studio's orbit. The decision effectively stalled her meteoric rise. Projects dried up, major roles disappeared, and her reputation shifted from future superstar to difficult talent. While some view Megan as outspoken and honest, others see her clash with the studio as a career-altering misstep. Her story remains one of Hollywood's clearest examples of how a single conflict with the wrong power player can lead to an unofficial but devastating ban. 24. Katherine Heigl. Katherine Heigl was once positioned as one of Hollywood's most promising leading ladies. With her breakout role on a hit medical drama and a string of successful romantic comedies, she seemed destined to dominate the industry for years. But behind the polished image, Heigl developed a reputation that would eventually overshadow her talent. Trouble began when she publicly criticized her own projects, first withdrawing her Emmy nomination by suggesting the writing on her show wasn't good enough, then calling one of her biggest films sexist. These remarks stunned writers, producers, and studio executives who felt publicly undermined by an actress they had helped elevate. Word spread quickly that Heigl was difficult, ungrateful, and demanding on set labels that became nearly impossible to shake. Soon, studios no longer wanted the risk of dealing with her unpredictable public comments or behind-the-scenes clashes. Her career slowed dramatically as roles disappeared and once supportive studios quietly distanced themselves. For some, Heigl is a talented actress who spoke her mind. For others, she's a cautionary tale about how burning bridges in Hollywood can lead to an unofficial ban that's far more damaging than any headline. 23. Brendan Fraser. Brendan Fraser was once a beloved Hollywood favorite, known for his charm, physical comedy, and starring roles in major adventure blockbusters. At his peak, he was everywhere, an actor audiences adored and studios relied on. But behind the scenes, his career was heading toward a much darker and more complicated turning point. Fraser later revealed that he was allegedly groped by a powerful Hollywood Foreign Press Association figure, an experience that left him shaken and emotionally withdrawn. When he spoke up about the incident, he believed the fallout was immediate. Invitations to major industry events suddenly stopped, and his access to studio-backed opportunities seemed to shrink overnight. At the same time, Brendan was dealing with severe physical injuries from years of stunt work, leading to multiple surgeries that limited his ability to take on demanding roles. Combined with his emotional distress and the alleged retaliation, studios gradually stopped considering him for major films. His disappearance from Hollywood felt abrupt and unexplained to many fans, but insiders whispered about political tensions, risk concerns, and too much trouble surrounding his name. Though Fraser eventually made a celebrated comeback, his long absence remains one of Hollywood's most quietly discussed cases of a star who may have been pushed out rather than forgotten. 22. Monique. Monique's rise to the top was nothing short of remarkable. Her unforgettable Oscar-winning performance in Precious positioned her as one of the most powerful talents of her generation. But instead of launching her into a new era of Hollywood success, the award became the center of a storm that would reshape and nearly end her career. Trouble began when she refused to participate in international promotion without additional pay. Lionsgate director Lee Daniels and producer Tyler Perry Kahara saw her refusal as uncooperative and unprofessional. Monique, however, believed she was simply standing up for fair treatment. The disagreement quickly escalated, and accusations of her being difficult spread throughout the industry. When she later publicly called out the studios claiming she had been blackballed for not working for free, the relationship between her and Hollywood collapsed entirely. Executives viewed her outspokenness as a challenge to the system. Monique viewed their reaction as punishment. Offers from major studios stopped almost overnight. Roles that should have been hers went to others, and her name quietly disappeared from casting discussions. Today, some consider her a victim of Hollywood politics, while others believe she mishandled a delicate situation. Either way, Monique remains one of the clearest examples of how quickly a studio conflict can lead to an unofficial ban. 21. Chevy Chase. Chevy Chase was once one of the most valuable comedic forces in American entertainment. A charismatic, sharp-witted performer whose presence could define an entire generation of comedy. But off-camera, his behavior became increasingly infamous. Stories of confrontations, harsh remarks, and tense relationships followed him from project to project. His breaking point came during the production of Community, where long-standing tensions with the cast and showrunner Dan Harmon exploded. Reports described him as disrespectful, dismissive, and often disruptive on set. His offensive comments and unpredictable outbursts created an environment that cast and crew members found exhausting. As the situation escalated, the studio and network realized they could no longer support him. Chase was written out of the series, and his relationship with NBC ended abruptly. From there, his opportunities with major studios shrank dramatically. Hollywood quietly stepped back, not because of his talent. He remains a comedy legend, but because working with him had become too high risk. His story shows how even the biggest comedic names can face an industry freeze when their off-screen behavior turns toxic. 20. Isaiah Washington. Isaiah Washington was rising fast, thanks to his role on one of television's most successful medical dramas. His talent and screen presence made him a standout, and his future in Hollywood seemed secure. But a single incident would change everything. During an on-set altercation, Washington used a homophobic slur, an event that quickly became public and ignited widespread backlash. The network faced mounting pressure, and Washington's subsequent attempts to address the controversy only intensified media attention. Behind the scenes, ABC executives debated the fallout. The scandal was hurting the show's reputation, and tensions among cast members were growing. Eventually, the studio made a decisive move. Washington's contract was not renewed, and he was effectively removed from the series. Afterward, major networks and studios hesitated to hire him, afraid the controversy would follow any project he joined. Though he continued working in smaller productions, he never regained the momentum he once had. Washington's experience remains a clear example of how a single controversy, magnified by public scrutiny, can result in a quiet but lasting industry ban. 19. James Woods. James Woods built a long career on fierce intensity, sharp intelligence, and a reputation as one of Hollywood's most commanding character actors. But as the industry evolved, Woods became increasingly known less for his performances and more for his explosive public presence. His outspoken political views, confrontational tone online, and willingness to attack colleagues in studios made him one of the most polarizing figures in entertainment. What troubled executives wasn't his ideology, it was the constant controversy that followed him. Producers claimed he created unnecessary risk, and studios quietly stepped back from hiring him. On several occasions, casting discussions reportedly ended the moment his name came up, with executives worried about public backlash or social media storms that could overshadow a project. Woods insisted he was being targeted for his beliefs, but many inside Hollywood argued the problem was his relentless online battles and personal attacks. As his public persona grew more aggressive, studios saw him as a liability rather than an asset. Today, he still commands respect as a performer, but his relationship with major studios remains fractured. Woods stands as an example of how modern Hollywood reacts when an actor becomes synonymous with controversy. 18. Rose McGowan. Rose McGowan was once one of the boldest and most magnetic stars of the late 90s and early 2000s. Her unique presence made her a favorite in both mainstream films and cult classics. But her life and career changed dramatically when she became one of the earliest voices to speak out about Hollywood abuse and misconduct. McGowan accused powerful producer Harvey Weinstein of assault, a revelation that would later spark global conversations. But in the years before the story went public, she said she was quietly blacklisted. Roles she auditioned for suddenly disappeared, meetings were canceled, and studios reportedly labeled her too risky. As the movement grew, McGowan became even more outspoken, calling out not just Weinstein, but the entire Hollywood system. Supporters praised her fearlessness, while detractors claimed she was too confrontational and difficult to work with. Whether out of fear, politics, or discomfort, major studios continued keeping their distance. McGowan found herself pushed to the margins of an industry she once thrived in. Her story remains a powerful reminder of how speaking out, especially against the wrong person, can lead to an unspoken but very real ban. 17. Thora Birch. Thora Birch was considered one of the most gifted young actresses of her generation, rising from child stardom to acclaimed adult performances. She had the talent, the momentum, and the respect of both critics and audiences. But her career was derailed by an unusual force, her father, who also served as her manager. Industry insiders claimed he repeatedly interfered with productions, confronted directors, and behaved in ways that made studios deeply uncomfortable. Some reports described his presence on set as controlling and disruptive, leading producers to view Thora as a high-risk hire not because of her behavior, but because of his. The breaking point came when she was abruptly fired from a major Broadway production due to her father's alleged conduct. After that, studios became hesitant to cast her in significant roles. Directors privately shared warnings, and the label of difficult family involvement stuck. Thora's career faded not from scandal of her own creation, but from a situation she could not fully escape. Hollywood's response was swift and unforgiving, leaving her largely shut out of the mainstream. Her story is one of the rare cases where a parent's actions, not the stars, led to an unofficial industry ban. 16. Vincent Gallo. Vincent Gallo built a reputation as one of Hollywood's most unpredictable independent filmmakers. Known for his raw, provocative style and refusal to conform, he became both celebrated and feared in the industry. But behind the artistic brilliance was a volatile personality that many collaborators found impossible to handle. Gallo publicly attacked critics, actors, journalists, and even studios, often in extreme and highly personal ways. The turning point came when he feuded with major distributors over the release of his controversial film, The Brown Bunny. His public tirades, including cursing out a well-known critic and attacking studio executives, spread quickly across the industry. What might have been dismissed as artistic passion soon became a reputation for hostility. Studios quietly backed away, fearing his temperament and the chaos he brought to every project. Directors who once admired him labeled him impossible, and producers avoided him entirely. While he continued creating art on his own terms, mainstream Hollywood essentially shut its doors. Gallo remains a polarizing figure, viewed by some as a misunderstood auteur, and by others as the embodiment of self-sabotage. His unofficial ban stemmed not from scandal, but from conduct so volatile that studios refused to take the risk. 15. Sean Young. Sean Young was on the brink of becoming one of Hollywood's biggest stars. With roles in classics like Blade Runner and Dune, she had beauty charisma and undeniable screen presence. But her rising career quickly unraveled as stories of erratic behavior began to overshadow her talent. Her reputation took a hit after several high-profile incidents, including crashing auditions, confronting directors, and appearing at industry events in ways that drew widespread media attention. The most infamous moment came when she showed up in a homemade Catwoman suit to demand an audition, a move that became a Hollywood punchline. Studios began viewing her as unpredictable, and insurance companies labeled her a potential liability. Directors who once championed her talent slowly stepped back and casting opportunities dried up. She later struggled with personal challenges, which further contributed to her diminished presence in the industry. Although Sean Young insists she was targeted unfairly, the industry narrative framed her as too unstable to hire. Hollywood's reaction was swift and near total. Her story stands as a cautionary tale of how quickly a promising career can collapse when perception shifts from talented to troublesome. 14. Ashley Judd. Ashley Judd enjoyed a strong career built on acclaimed performances, intelligence, and advocacy. But everything changed when she became one of the first actresses to speak out against Harvey Weinstein. Her allegations were serious and deeply impactful, but Hollywood's reaction in the years before the scandal fully surfaced was quietly devastating. According to Judd, Weinstein retaliated by telling studios she was a nightmare to work with, effectively blacklisting her. Later documents and testimonies suggested he pressured filmmakers to remove her from major roles, including a major fantasy franchise. As these decisions accumulated, Judd noticed her career opportunities shrinking. While her talent never faded, offers from major studios nearly disappeared. She continued to work, but the roles were smaller, less frequent, and far from the trajectory she once had. When the Weinstein scandal finally broke open, Judd's claims were widely supported, yet the damage to her career had already been done. Her story illustrates how power dynamics in Hollywood can silence even respected stars, and how retaliation can function as an invisible but effective studio ban. 13. Taylor Momsen. Taylor Momsen entered Hollywood as a rising teen star, gaining major attention for her role on Gossip Girl. With striking looks and a rebellious aura, she quickly became one of the show's most talked-about cast members. But as her interest in acting faded and her focus shifted toward music, her on-set behavior became increasingly difficult for the production to manage. Reports surfaced of frequent lateness, missed rehearsals, and a general lack of professionalism. Crew members described her as disengaged, and writers struggled to maintain storylines around her unpredictable availability. Behind the scenes, the studio grew frustrated with her attitude and her apparent indifference toward the series that had made her famous. When Momsen leaned fully into her hard-edged rock persona, controversies followed provocative performances, explicit interviews, and a growing public perception that she was spiraling. CW executives eventually decided to write her character out of the show, and industry insiders claimed she had become unreliable and not worth the risk. Though she found success in her music career, her acting prospects nearly vanished. The industry viewed her departure not as a transition, but as a breakdown of trust. For many studios, Taylor Momsen became a cautionary tale of young stardom gone off track. 12. Mira Sorvino. Mira Sorvino was once one of the most promising actresses of her generation, earning an Academy Award and delivering performances praised for elegance and emotional depth. Her talent positioned her for a long, successful career, but her trajectory changed abruptly after she reportedly rejected advances from producer Harvey Weinstein. Years later, multiple industry insiders revealed that Sorvino had been quietly blacklisted. Weinstein allegedly pressured directors to drop her from major projects, including a widely discussed fantasy trilogy. At the time, Sorvino couldn't understand why roles she was close to securing suddenly disappeared, or why meetings ended without explanations. As the blacklist took effect, Sorvino's presence in major studio films diminished. Despite her skill and reputation, she found herself pushed into smaller projects, far below her previous standing. Hollywood, without ever publicly acknowledging it, had effectively closed its doors to her. When the Weinstein scandal finally exploded, Sorvino's experience became one of the clearest examples of how power in Hollywood could be used to sabotage a career. Her story remains a painful reminder of how far-reaching and invisible retaliation can be within the industry. 11. Lena Headey. Lena Headey became a global sensation through her commanding performance in Game of Thrones, but long before that, she faced a troubling period where major studios kept their distance. Headey later revealed she too had been targeted after rejecting advances from Harvey Weinstein early in her career. According to her account, Weinstein reacted with hostility, and subsequent meetings with his company became uncomfortable or abruptly ended. After the encounter, Headey noticed a sudden decline in opportunities roles she had been considered for vanished, and studio-backed projects stopped returning her calls. While she continued working in television and independent film, she struggled to break into the major studio world during those years. Only when Game of Thrones became a global hit did she reclaim the visibility she had long deserved. Hollywood later acknowledged her experience as part of a wider pattern of retaliation under Weinstein's influence. Headey's story highlights how even strong, talented performers can find their careers quietly restricted when they cross powerful figures, an unspoken ban that shaped her trajectory long before her eventual success. 10. Edward Norton. Edward Norton is widely regarded as one of the most gifted actors of his generation, intense, intelligent, and fiercely committed to every role he takes. But that same dedication became the source of tension with major studios. Norton developed a reputation for taking control of projects, rewriting scripts without permission, and challenging directors on set. The situation reached a breaking point during the production of The Incredible Hulk. Norton wanted a darker, more character-driven film, while Marvel Studios pushed for a lighter blockbuster tone. Behind-the-scenes disagreements escalated into full creative conflict. By the time the movie was released, Marvel had grown frustrated with his unwillingness to compromise. When the studio moved forward with the next phase of its cinematic universe, Norton was quietly removed and replaced. Marvel issued a statement emphasizing the need for collaborative spirit, a thinly veiled reference to his reputation. After that, other major studios hesitated to cast him in large-scale productions. While Norton continued to deliver acclaimed work in smaller films, Hollywood largely kept him at arm's length. His story became a textbook example of how artistic perfectionism can cross into territory studios view as obstruction, leading to an unofficial ban from blockbuster franchises. 9. Terrence Howard. Terrence Howard seemed poised for long-term stardom after playing a key role in the first Iron Man, helping launch what would become the biggest movie franchise in history. But behind the success was a contract dispute that dramatically shifted his future. Howard claimed Marvel reduced his salary for the sequel, despite his earlier agreement. The The studio, however, pointed to reported difficulties on set issues with behavior punctuality and conflicts with the creative team. As negotiations collapsed, Marvel made the decision to recast him, replacing him with Don Cheadle. Howard later said he was blindsided and believed the studio punished him for standing up for his contract. Marvel never publicly detailed its reasons, but industry insiders described him as too unpredictable for a multi-film commitment. After the fallout, opportunities with major studios declined. He continued working, but the sudden loss of a major franchise role sent a clear message across Hollywood. Howard's story shows how quickly a behind-the-scenes conflict, especially with a powerhouse studio, can lead to a lasting industry freeze. 8. Bridget Fonda. Bridget Fonda came from Hollywood royalty and built a respected career through the 90s, starring in thrillers, dramas, and action films that showcased her range. But despite her talent and legacy, she stepped back from the industry after a series of disputes with studios and creative teams. Reports suggested Fonda became increasingly selective, turning down high-profile roles that studios expected her to accept. Over time, executives began labeling her as difficult to negotiate, with citing disagreements over scripts, schedules, and creative direction. A serious car accident further slowed her career, but insiders claimed many studios had already begun distancing themselves. Some felt she no longer wanted to cooperate within the studio system. Others believed she was simply tired of Hollywood politics. Either way, the roles dwindled. By the early 2000s, Fonda quietly vanished from the industry, leaving behind a career that had once been full of promise. Her story is unusual. She wasn't banned for scandal or misconduct, but for being seen as unwilling to play the studio game, an unspoken rule that Hollywood rarely forgives. 7. Wesley Snipes. Wesley Snipes was once one of Hollywood's top action stars, rising to global fame with the Blade franchise. His intense screen presence and martial arts talent made him a fan favorite, but behind the scenes, tensions were growing. Reports from the set of Blade Trinity claimed Snipes clashed non-stop with the director, and cast often refusing to communicate directly and insisting on staying in character to an extreme degree. Crew members described him as distant, uncooperative, and difficult to manage. The conflict escalated when Snipes allegedly filed complaints, refused certain shots, and even communicated with the director through written notes instead of speaking. These incidents spread quickly across Hollywood. Studios began viewing him as a liability, especially for large-scale productions requiring strict scheduling and teamwork. At the same time, Snipes became entangled in legal and tax issues, which only intensified concerns. By the time Blade ended, major studios quietly stepped away. Projects he once would have led went to other actors, and his blockbuster career faded abruptly. Though he later rebuilt his image through smaller roles and independent films, Snipes remained an example of how on-set conflict combined with legal trouble can lead to an unofficial ban from mainstream studio projects. 6. Charlie Sheen. Charlie Sheen was for years one of the most bankable stars in television, earning massive success through hit sitcoms and a unique comedic persona. But his off-screen life spiraled into chaos, fueled by addiction, public feuds, and erratic behavior that dominated headlines. As his troubles intensified, so did the strain on the studio responsible for his show. During the height of his meltdown, Sheen launched a series of explosive rants against the show's creator and the network, publicly attacking the people who had made him the highest-paid actor on television. His behavior became increasingly unpredictable, prompting insurance concerns and production delays. Eventually, the studio terminated his contract, marking one of the most dramatic firings in TV history. What followed was an unspoken industry-wide freeze. Major networks and studios did not want the risk that came with his name. Though he attempted a comeback, Hollywood largely closed its doors. Sheen's story became the clearest example of how extreme personal conflict with a studio can lead to a near-total professional ban. 5. Randy Quaid. Randy Quaid was once a respected character actor, appearing in acclaimed films and blockbusters alike. But over time, his life veered into increasingly bizarre territory. Quaid and his wife began claiming that a secret group of Hollywood star whackers was targeting him, accusing studios and executives of conspiring to ruin his career. As his allegations grew more erratic, so did his behavior. He faced legal issues, including vandalism and skipping court dates, which further complicated his relationship with the industry. Producers became hesitant to work with him, not knowing whether he would show up, follow guidelines, or create unpredictable problems during filming. Eventually, Quaid left the United States, announcing he was escaping Hollywood persecution. The studios, meanwhile, quietly decided he was too unstable to insure or hire. Roles stopped coming, and Quaid's once strong career faded into obscurity. His case is one of the most extreme examples of how personal instability and conspiracy-driven behavior can lead to an effective industry-wide ban. 4. Shannen Doherty. Shannen Doherty became one of the most recognizable faces of 90s television, starring in Beverly Hills 90210 and later Charmed. Her strong screen presence and charisma made her a standout, but her off-screen reputation quickly became a problem. Reports circulated of frequent arguments, conflicts with co-stars, and tension with producers. Crew members described her as talented but unpredictable, often clashing with those in charge. Her departure from 90210 was steeped in rumors of on-set disputes and unprofessional behavior. When similar issues arose during Charmed, studios began to view Doherty as too volatile to anchor a long-running series. Insurance concerns grew, and writers found it increasingly difficult to work around her schedule and demands. Eventually, producers made the decision to remove her from the show, and whispers of her being difficult became industry consensus. Offers from major studios dwindled, and she shifted toward smaller projects and guest appearances. While Doherty has always defended herself, arguing that media exaggerated her behavior, Hollywood's perception became fixed. Her career demonstrates how a reputation for conflict, even if inflated, can result in an unofficial but long-lasting industry ban. 3. Lindsay Lohan. Lindsay Lohan began as one of Hollywood's brightest young talents, earning acclaim for her early roles and natural comedic timing. But as her fame grew, so did her personal struggles. A series of legal troubles, DUIs, court appearances, and highly publicized addictions turned her life into a tabloid spectacle. Studios soon faced a major problem. Lohan had become nearly impossible to insure. Productions feared delays, erratic behavior, and the possibility that she wouldn't show up for filming. Even when she tried to stabilize her career, the baggage of her past made studios extremely hesitant to take the risk. Her professionalism was questioned repeatedly. Late arrivals, missed rehearsals, and on-set conflicts contributed to mounting concerns. Movie executives who once viewed her as a future superstar now saw her as a liability. Eventually, major studios stopped offering her roles altogether. Lohan continued to work, but the projects were smaller and far from her peak. Her story remains one of Hollywood's most famous examples of how personal turmoil can overshadow talent and lead to a near-total freeze from studio-backed productions. 2. Winona Ryder. Winona Ryder was once one of Hollywood's most beloved actresses, known for her expressive performances and magnetic presence. But her career took a dramatic downturn after a highly publicized shoplifting incident in the early 2000s. Though the crime was non-violent, the media frenzy surrounding her arrest was overwhelming. Studios viewed the scandal as damaging to their image and worried about audience reactions. Overnight, Ryder went from being a prestige actress to a perceived liability. Projects she had lined up were quietly dropped, and studios distanced themselves to avoid negative publicity. Insurance companies also raised concerns, making her harder to hire for major roles. Combined with rumors of instability and personal struggles, the incident created a narrative that was difficult for her to escape. Winona continued acting, but at a much slower pace, appearing mostly in smaller or independent films. It wasn't until many years later, thanks to a major streaming series, that she finally regained widespread recognition. Her experience shows how a single scandal amplified by public scrutiny can trigger an unofficial ban that lasts far longer than anyone expects. 1. Marlon Brando. Marlon Brando is widely considered one of the greatest actors in film history, but his relationship with Hollywood studios was famously turbulent. Early in his career, Brando revolutionized acting with unprecedented emotional depth and raw realism. Yet as his fame grew, so did his refusal to cooperate with the traditional studio system. Brando challenged directors, ignored scripts, and openly defied producers' behaviors that made studios wary of working with him. The tensions peaked during several productions, where Brando reportedly caused delays, demanded extensive rewrites, or clashed with filmmakers. His unpredictable behavior and willingness to walk away from projects created enormous financial risk. Studios began to see him as brilliant but uncontrollable. On Mutiny on the Bounty, Brando's conflicts with the crew and constant reshoots contributed to massive budget overruns. The studio blamed him publicly, and his reputation as a difficult actor became cemented. For years afterward, major studios avoided hiring him unless absolutely necessary, or unless a director specifically insisted on him. Despite his legendary status, Brando spent long stretches essentially frozen out of high-profile studio projects. His later comeback proved his enduring talent, but his career remains a reminder that even Hollywood's most iconic performer could face unofficial bans for refusing to play by studio rules. Hollywood loves success stories, but it never forgets the ones it pushes away. These 25 stars learned the hard way that power conflict and politics can shut doors faster than fame can open them. Some rebuilt their careers. Some never returned. And some remained trapped in the shadow of decisions made behind closed studio doors. If you want to explore more hidden stories, banned careers, and untold Hollywood history, check out the other videos pinned in the description and comments. And before you go, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. There are many more secrets waiting inside Tick Tick.